There was a time right in the middle of a sun-drenched schoolyard when a little girl turned to her group of friends and shouted, "This is my pretend husband." Okay, I was 10 years old. I was in 5th grade in Mr. Harold Grant's class. Way down at the end of the hallway, right next to the old equipment room, where the smell of chalk dust still clung to our sleeves. We wrote with pencils or ballpoint pens, sat at rough wooden desks worn down by years of use, and wrestled with endless spelling tests. And yet in that tiny little world, there was one sentence that made my heart, the heart of a shy boy with very few friends, almost burst with the strangest kind of happiness. Her name was Jenny. She wore her hair in pigtails and always had a bracelet made of pink rubber bands, braided by her own hands. Jenny was not the top student in class, but she was definitely the brightest one, loud, cheerful, always at the center of every silly game and prank. And I, the quiet kid in the back row, the one whose name often got skipped during roll call, got pulled out into the middle of the yard by her as she laughed and announced, "From now on, this is my pretend husband." Everyone remember that I still remember that noon so clearly. Sunlight slanting through the window, panes bouncing off Jenny's hair and turning it a glowing shade of brown. The whole group of kids burst out laughing. One of them even drew a wedding ring circle on the ground with a stick. I just stood there completely frozen, my face burning hot and my heart pounding like a school drum. Back then I had no idea that such a simple, silly sentence could stay with me for so long. Nearly 60 years have passed. But all it takes is someone saying the words, "5th grade husband," and I feel my heart turn young again, like childhood never really left. And what about you? Has anyone ever called you by a name that made your face turn bright red? If they have, tell the story. Who knows? Maybe somewhere your childhood is still waiting to be called out loud, one more time. And if what I shared made you smile, hit that subscribe button so when memory comes knocking, you will not miss a single moment with me. And if you want to understand why she called me her husband, we have to start with that very classroom. Every time I stepped over that worn-down doorway, smoothed by the footsteps of generations of students, it felt like I was walking into a separate world, a place where time slowed down, where sounds softened until all you could hear was the chalk gliding across the blackboard and the rustle of paper during long, quiet lessons. The chalkboard, once dark green, was now faded, dotted with leftover chalk and scratch marks. Yesterday's lessons still faint, like forgotten memories. Mr. Grant's desk held a tilted jar of old pens and a worn leather notebook. One leg of his chair wobbled, creaking every time he sat like an old man, sighing into the day. The desks were hardwood reddish-brown paint, flaking off in patches. Knife marks covered the top's initials, hearts, random numbers. The chairs were short, making us hunch to write. And when we stood, the room filled with its usual chorus squeaks, scrapes, and cloth brushing against old wood. Strange how much I miss that sound now. I sat at the last desk by the window, not by choice, but because no one else wanted it. I was the quiet kid, lost in books, drifting through classmates like a leaf in a crowded stream. But from there, I could see the whole room, especially Jenny's second row from the middle left side. Jenny was new to the school, small in size with a chin-length haircut and eyes that sparkled like glass marbles. She was unlike any other kid in class. She did not need to try to stand out. Her eyes and her smile made people turn and look. She usually wore a white shirt and a pleated blue skirt, but she always added a colorful butterfly hair clip, a different color each day, sometimes green, sometimes lemon yellow, and on that fateful day, bright red like a ripe strawberry. Mr. Grant, our homeroom teacher, was a tall, slightly hunched man, always wearing his glasses low on his nose with a steady voice like an AM radio in the early morning. He loved history. Every class felt like a radio broadcast from the battlefield. One time while talking about the Battle of Antietam, he suddenly asked Jack, if you were General McClellan, what would you have done differently? I froze, unable to answer. Somewhere in front of me, I heard a soft laugh from Jenny. Not a mocking laugh, an encouraging one. After that, I started paying more attention in history class. Not exactly for the lesson, but because of her eyes. And then came a Tuesday morning. I remember it clearly because the sky was overcast, and the breeze slipped through the window, making the faded curtain flutter. While I was writing, my pen suddenly ran out of ink. I fumbled in frustration, and then Jenny turned around. "Can I borrow your eraser for a second?" she asked, her voice as light and clear as wind chimes. I handed it to her without looking. My hand was stained with ink, smudges all over my palm. She took the eraser, then paused for a few seconds. And then she held out her left hand for me to see. In her palm was my name, Jack, written in red marker. I froze. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. I looked at Jenny. She just gave me a small smile, like she was letting me in on a secret just for the two of us. Then she turned back around and kept writing like nothing had happened. I sat there gripping my pen tightly, my mind tangled like a ball of string. I could not even understand what I was feeling. Surprise, joy, or something newer, bigger, harder to name. All I knew was that from that moment on, the back of the class no longer felt like a place for the forgotten. It became special, the perfect spot to watch every little move of the girl who had written my name on her hand. And that day, for the first time, someone wrote my name in the palm of their hand, not on a class list, not on the honor roll, but right on the ink-stained skin of a 10-year-old girl, full of mischief, innocence, and unspoken things. I never managed to keep a single piece of paper from my childhood, but that image, that desk, that smile, they remain crystal clear in my memory, as if it all happened just yesterday. From that day on, I began paying more attention to Jenny's notebooks. And then I discovered something. A small detail, really, but it made me feel like I was holding a beautiful little secret from the world. After Jenny wrote my name on her hand, I started noticing more. Not just her, but the little things no one else seemed to notice. The way she tilted her head when she read, how she lightly bit the end of her pencil when thinking, even how she placed her hand on the desk, always slightly to the left, like she was hiding or showing something. And then I discovered Jenny loved drawing hearts. Not big ones in the middle of the page, tiny ones, sometimes no bigger than a pinky nail, hidden in the corners of pages, the edge of a notebook, or the back cover. She drew them in pencil so light you could miss them if you weren't looking carefully. Once, when I borrowed her math notebook to copy some homework, I noticed a tiny heart in the bottom corner of a page, and inside it were the letters J plus J. My heart tightened. I was still unsure. My name was Jack. Hers was Jenny, but it could be another J. Wright, Jimmy Joseph, I put the notebook back where I found it and never asked, but from then on I started watching her notebook more closely. Whenever she left her books behind during recess, I would sneak a glance. Some pages were blank, others had tiny drawings, heart stars, sometimes 2 stick figures holding hands. I did not understand all of them, but I knew one thing: it was how she stored her thoughts. And then one day I caught her in the act. It was a hot afternoon. We had free drawing time. Mr. Grant was in a meeting, and the class leader was in charge. Everyone was busy drawing whatever came to mind. As usual, I just sat and watched. Jenny was 2 desks away by the window, with sunlight dappling her hair through the glass. I saw her tilt her head, spinning her pencil slowly in her hand. Then very carefully, she began to draw a heart in the corner of her paper. I stayed completely still. Every stroke felt like it moved with a heartbeat, hers or maybe mine. She paused, looked at it, then erased it. I felt a strange emptiness, but then she drew it again, this time faster, more naturally, like she had made up her mind. And when I looked closer, inside that heart in tiny wobbly letters was J plus J. I thought maybe I was imagining it. I rubbed my eyes and looked again. The heart was still there, tiny, silent, like a confession that did not need to be spoken. Just then, Jenny looked up. She looked straight at me, and I swear she smiled, a cheeky, playful smile like she knew I was watching, and she did not mind letting me see. I looked away, face-burning ears, hot, but inside something shifted. It was no longer that vague, fluttery feeling from when I saw my name on her hand. It was something else. Something like being chosen. Like out of all the names in the class, out of all the worn-out desks and faces, she had drawn that heart just for me. From that day on, I started drawing too. Not on paper, in my mind. I started collecting every moment she drew, every hidden doodle she left behind, every tiny paper heart she folded and tucked into the back of her notebook. One time after arts and crafts class, I saw her fold a light pink piece of paper into a heart and place it in her pencil case. I thought she was going to give it to someone, but it stayed there for weeks, edges fraying. Maybe it did not need to be given. Maybe just making it was enough. I still remember that afternoon so clearly, when the wind blew and scattered the pages of Jenny's notebook. I bent down to help her pick them up. When I turned to the back cover, there it was, a whole row of hearts. Big ones, small ones, lopsided ones, each one like a different version of the same thought. And in the very bottom corner, in tiny letters, was the question, is 5th grade love real? I did not say anything. Neither did she. But her smile, the way she looked at me, it was enough for me to believe. It was. The kind of childhood love people think is just a game. I held on to it all these years. Over the years, I have read dozens of love letters, heard countless declarations at weddings and anniversaries, but nothing ever moved me like those faint pencil lines, those quickly drawn hearts and clumsy little paper folds, so sincere in their simplicity. Now in an old wooden box in the basement, I still keep a few of those paper hearts. Yellowed, curled at the edges, the writing faded with time. Every time I open that box, I feel like I hear a soft laugh in my ear, and I see a boy sitting at the back of the class, cheeks red, realizing someone out there was drawing his name inside a tiny heart. And then autumn arrived, bringing with it the excitement of the school fair. I never expected that somewhere between the music and the apple pies, Jenny would make my heart skip a beat once again. When the leaves started to change colors and chilly breezes swept through the hallways, I knew fall had truly come to our little town. Every year around the third week of October, our school hosted a fall festival, a day the students looked forward to even more than Christmas. The schoolyard was cleaned up early. Wooden booths were set up along the rows of maple trees. There were apple pies, lemonade, caramel apples, and handmade crafts created by students and parents. Strings of colorful flags hung along the hallways, flapping like paper birds in the wind. I was not the kind of kid who liked crowded games. Usually I just wandered around watching from a distance as others tossed balls into tin cans or tried to guess the number of candies in a glass jar. But that year was different. The guest list had been emailed to the alumni group, open for everyone to see. I did not think Jenny would even care. But it turned out someone still remembered, still watched from afar without ever saying a word. Jenny wore a light yellow dress with a thin sweater embroidered with a red maple leaf over her heart. Her hair was tied up high with a bright red bow, a color so bold it felt like a sign that something was about to happen. While I was standing near the apple pie booth, trying to stay out of sight, she appeared right next to me, as if she'd stepped straight out of the air. Jack, she called, her eyes sparkling like she was holding a secret. Come with me. Before I could react, she grabbed my hand. Her small hand was warm and dry, gently squeezing like we had known each other in a past life. She pulled me through the crowd of laughing students past her curious group of friends, and then, standing right in front of the busiest game booth, in front of a dozen people, she shouted, "You're my pretend husband for today, okay?" Time froze. A few kids burst out laughing. Some stared wide-eyed. Someone even whistled, and I stood frozen. My face flushed. My ears rang. My heart pounded like it was going to explode. The whole school heard it. My face turned as red as a ripe tomato. Jenny was still holding my hand. She did not look embarrassed. In fact, she laughed. A confident laugh like she had just won a secret competition I did not even know was happening. It's the festival. Everyone gets to choose a role. I chose you to be my pretend husband. It's for today, okay? She whispered close to my ear, and I could hear every word, every breath tinged with the scent of warm apple pie. I nodded like a robot. She took me to every booth. Ring toss, mystery prizes, face painting, paper badge making. Every time we won something, she would cheer. My husband is so good at this, making me blush but also feel strange, like something inside me had awakened. Some part of the shy boy who always sat in the back row suddenly knew how to lift his head, smile, and even crack a joke. At the apple pie booth, Jenny insisted on buying 2 slices. She picked the biggest one, drizzled honey and cinnamon on top, then handed me one. We stood close under the trees as she told me that her family baked pies every year. Her mom always said fall without apple pie is not really fall. I had not even taken a bite when her hand gently touched mine, a light, almost accidental brush that made me freeze. She held her slice close to my mouth. Try this one, it's better. I opened my mouth without thinking and took a bite, just as a piece of her pie slipped and fell to the ground. She looked down, then laughed. Well, too late now. Husbands are supposed to share with their wives, right? I handed her my whole slice. She took a tiny bite, closed her eyes, and savored it. I stood beside her, not knowing what to do, hearing nothing but the beating of my own heart, amid the fuzzy speaker music echoing from the hallway, the excited footsteps, the scent of pie and dry leaves. I stood next to the girl who had drawn hearts in her notebook, who had held my hand in front of everyone, who had called me a name no one else ever had. Jack, she tilted her head, eyes mischievous. If you forget this someday, I'll tell the whole class. I did not say anything. I could not. But deep down, I promised myself, how could I ever forget? We played the paper horse rides, went on the hay ride, then sat on a wooden bench in the corner of the yard, watching maple leaves fall. Jenny rested her head on my shoulder, not for long, just a few minutes. But to a 10-year-old boy, it felt like an entire universe unfolding. That night when I got home, I carefully hid the red ribbon she had secretly slipped into my pocket before we said goodbye. She said it was our wedding gift. Wear it and you're my husband. Keep it and you're keeping the promise. I did not show anyone. I did not tell my mom or even Billy. I just opened it once to look, then folded it again and placed it in a small tin box, the one where I kept the most precious treasures of my childhood. Now, whenever autumn comes back, whenever I hear music crackling from an old speaker at some tiny market or smell apple pie baking in Linda's kitchen, my heart stirs. Not because fall is beautiful, but because that fall, I was once the husband of a 5th grade girl in Mr. Grant's class. After that festival, when everything seemed to go back to normal, Jenny started doing something quietly, something I never expected. A small, clumsy gift that made my heart tremble the moment I received it. After the fall festival, I thought things would return to usual. Math quizzes, boring PE classes, the bell always ringing earlier than I wanted. But no. Something inside me had changed. Not something dramatic. More like finding a secret door in a house you've lived in your whole life. And from that moment on, you want to peek through it every single day. Jenny no longer pulled me through crowds or shouted husband in front of everyone, but her eyes, they were still the same playful, sparkling, always like they knew something I had not figured out yet. One chilly morning in early November, I got to class early as usual and found a small folded piece of paper placed neatly next to my literature notebook. I looked around. The classroom was still empty. Mr. Grant had not arrived. The air still carried a cold mist from the night before. I opened the paper. It was a handmade card. The colors were a little smudged. Some ink had bled like she folded it too soon before it dried. It showed a small house with 2 stick figures, one in a dress, one in a shirt. They were holding hands inside a giant pale purple heart. Above it in wobbly letters, "Happy Not Yet Wedding Day." I read the words over and over again. Wedding day. Not yet. I was not sure whether to laugh or feel alarmed. Part of me wanted to hide the card, another part wanted to hold on to it forever. And I did the first thing I could think of. I looked up. Jenny was sitting in her seat. She was not looking at me, but her lips were pressed together like she was trying not to smile. That whole class, I heard nothing. Mr. Grant was teaching about the first presidents of the United States, but all I could think about was the drawing of 2 stick figures holding hands, a purple heart with smeared ink, and that line: "Silly, bold, unforgettable, happy not yet wedding day." During recess, I tucked the card into my desk drawer. No one saw, and I never asked Jenny about it. But from that day on, I would often peek at it, like a map leading to something far away, something scary and thrilling all at once. One afternoon, I waited until everyone left the room before opening it again. The top left corner had a small tear, maybe from being pulled out too quickly, or maybe the paper was just thin. Her handwriting in red marker was round, but slightly tilted, like she wrote in a rush before the thought slipped away. On the back, I found another line. The bride has picked the groom. This paper is the contract. I laughed. For the first time in my life, I laughed by myself over a scrap of paper. I was not the type who laughed much, but right then I felt light as air, like someone had quietly tucked a piece of music into my serious, rule-filled world, just for me to hum alone. The next week, Jenny did not give me anything else. But sometimes during class, when the teacher was not looking, she would glance back at me, point to my desk drawer, and whisper, "Still got it?" I nodded. She nodded back. That was it. One day, when it was pouring rain and water slammed against the classroom windows, she slipped me a small paper folded into a triangle. I opened it. Inside was a drawing of a tall, wobbly wedding cake with 3 layers about to topple over. On top were 2 more stick figures, one with a hat, the other with long hair. Around them were a few small hearts. Below she wrote, "If we ever make a real wedding cake someday, make sure it does not fall over like this." Okay, I still have that piece of paper. Though now it is crumpled, the paper has turned brown with age, and the red ink is faint, like a whisper from somewhere far away. She called it a paper wedding, just between the 2 of us. I never told anyone, not even Billy, the brother who usually dug out all my secrets, ever found out. Every time someone came near my desk, I would pretend to be looking for a book just to hide that drawer. It was the place I kept the only thing a 10-year-old boy could call precious. A handmade card, smudged, worn, and a little torn, but more beautiful than any store-bought card I have ever seen. Sometimes, when boring lessons dragged on, I would sneak glances at Jenny. She would be deep in her books, her hair falling to one side, resting her chin on her hand, occasionally sketching something on the edge of her notebook. I guessed, or maybe hoped, it was another tiny heart. Years later, as I grew up, I received many gifts. Birthday presents, Christmas surprises, graduation gifts, even wedding presents. Some were expensive, some elaborate, some wrapped in shimmering paper. But none of them stayed with me the way that little purple card did. Because it was not just my first gift. It was the first time I ever knew what it felt like to be chosen. So innocently, so bravely, so truly. But like all things from childhood, the joy did not last forever. One afternoon, I saw Jenny laughing with another boy. And for the first time, I felt something I had never known before: jealousy. I thought that after all the smudged cards, the hand-drawn hearts and holding hands at the festival, maybe Jenny and I had our own little world. It wasn't love. I was 10. I didn't know love. But I knew how it felt to wait for someone to walk in, to hear their laugh and feel the day get better, to glance sideways and brighten for no clear reason. That Wednesday afternoon, I remember it well, hit like cold rain on a sunny day. The sky was bright, the air cool. Kids ran around laughing, sneakers screeching across the schoolyard. I stood near the red brick wall behind the main building where Jenny and I used to play hopscotch. The chalk lines still faint on the smooth floor. But Jenny wasn't alone. She was standing close to a boy, Tim, I think. He was a little taller blonde, always glowing like he carried the sun. He smiled, holding a small tin box. Jenny leaned in, giggled, and tapped his shoulder. Just once. But to me it felt like thunder cracking through a cloudless sky. I stood still. I did not walk over. I did not turn away. I just stood there, my heart tightening with something strange. A feeling I would not know the name of until years later, as an adult: jealousy. No one ever taught me what jealousy was. There was no lesson that said, when someone you care about seems close to someone else, you will feel a pain in a place where there is no wound. But right then I understood. I was not mad at Jenny. I did not blame Tim. I just felt like I had been pushed out of the world I thought Jenny and I shared. The red brick wall seemed farther away, and the laughter of the girl I thought I knew suddenly sounded unfamiliar. I turned and walked away. That afternoon I sat quietly in class. I did not look her way. I did not laugh when Mr. Grant told stories about Washington crossing the frozen river. I just stared out the window where the yellow leaves kept drifting by like someone waving from a place I could not reach. At the end of the day, I was the last to leave the classroom. I purposely took my time hoping to avoid walking beside anyone, especially Jenny. But just as I was putting on my backpack ready to go, she appeared in front of me. Without saying anything, Jenny held out her hand. In her palm was a peppermint candy wrapped in crinkled white and green paper. "For you," she said, her eyes looking straight at me, her voice calm and steady, not a hint of hesitation. I did not know whether to take it, but her hand stayed open, not pulling back. I reached out. Not trembling this time, but my fingers were cold. The candy dropped into my hand like a leaf, light and small, but enough to shake something inside me for the rest of the night. Peppermint. The kind of candy I had told her I liked best just the week before. I never expected her to remember. And even more, I never expected her to give it to me at the exact moment I needed a sign that I still mattered in her little heart. That night I did not eat the candy. I placed it in my pencil case, the special spot where I'd once kept the folded paper heart, where I'd hidden the not yet wedding day card. That small wrinkled piece of candy wrapper probably made no sense to anyone else. But to me, it was an unspoken apology, a hand reaching out, just when the other thought it was about to be forgotten. The next day I did not ask Jenny anything. She did not explain. But during class, while the teacher was writing on the board, I noticed a tiny piece of paper being slid across to the edge of my desk. I opened it. It was a familiar drawing. 2 stick figures standing side by side holding hands. Above each head was a letter A, J, no hearts, no words of apology. Just 2 letters, J. But I understood. Even without being taught, I knew what it meant to lose something precious, and also what it meant to be found again. Years later, I would go through all kinds of relationships. People would come and go. Some would hurt me. I would hurt others too. But very rarely could I recognize a feeling the moment it bloomed. Like I did that day standing behind the red brick wall, watching a laugh I thought belonged only to me drift somewhere else. And only once in my life did a girl come back, without an explanation, without a single excuse, and simply hand me a peppermint candy wrapped in wrinkled paper, as if to say, "You are still here in my heart." Even though no one ever said it aloud, it felt like there was a quiet promise between me and Jenny. And then one sunny afternoon after class, our little wedding suddenly came to life in the backyard of the school. The final bell rang on a late autumn afternoon, as golden sunlight slowly spilled across the schoolyard, tinting the fallen leaves red as they danced in the breeze. That day the sky was clear. The wind hummed softly through the windows, like a private symphony made just for memory. I took a deep breath and felt like everything around me was slowing down, like this moment was a scene from a film, paused just long enough to take in every detail. A group of kids ran out into the yard excitedly rushing toward the muddy patch behind the school, where a few wild weeds still grew survivors from summer. In that crowd, Jenny was already prepared. She held a white tissue, a folded piece of paper, and a tiny bouquet she'd picked from the railing behind the classroom. Her dress puffed slightly and her smile lit up like a freshly bloomed flower in the late afternoon sun. I wandered after them, not sure if I was following out of curiosity or because my round little heart felt like it was about to leap out of my chest. "Jack, hurry up." Jenny called, her voice half teasing, half serious. She reached out her arm to pull me along. "We're playing wedding." "Okay, you're the groom today." I froze. The groom. Until then, I had only known weddings from cartoons. There was no script, no props, just a tissue. But then she tied the tissue on my head like a veil, took it gently from her hand, and placed it on me like a crown. She wore a crown of wildflowers, tiny leaves, and corn husks braided like something a mother might make on a quiet afternoon. In the sunlight, hair fluttering, she looked like a princess with a secret smile. The kids gathered around wide-eyed. "Is this a real wedding? Where's the cake?" "The ring?" someone asked. Jenny laughed and pulled out a candy wrapper ring, gently sliding it onto my left hand. I froze, surprised and shy. The ring glinted among the ink stains from class. Wind rustled leaves, and for a second I thought, maybe this is what a wedding feels like. Some friends clapped, some played photographers with binder clips. Girls put tissues on their heads. Boys acted as priests. Jenny led me slowly around the yard, half serious, half giggling. Her hand touched my shoulder, light but warm like the last day of summer. I felt the breeze in our hair, smelled wild grass, and heard childhood ringing clear all around. We stopped under the big old tree behind the school. A few golden leaves floated down, landing on her shoulder, catching on the wrinkled veil. Jenny gently brushed them away, then looked at me and smiled. "A fifth-grade wedding," she said, her voice tiny but clear. "No cake, no sweet wine, just me and you." Is that boring? Somewhere inside, I began to understand. Magic did not always come from fancy things. Sometimes it was in the smell of dry leaves, in the gentle touch of her hand, in the way our friends watched us with surprised admiration and maybe just a little envy. That was our fifth-grade wedding. Time seemed to pause. The wrinkled veil fluttered away as she lifted it off my head. The paper ring fell and rolled across the yard, stopping among the dry leaves. But the image stayed, burned into memory like a quiet poem, simple, rough, and so heartbreakingly beautiful. Right then I thought, maybe this is what a wedding is. Not the kind from fairy tales with white gowns and roses, but the kind between two kids, wide-eyed and clueless, in a schoolyard full of falling leaves, with a tissue for a veil and wildflowers for a crown. And still, enough to make a heart tremble. After our backyard wedding, I thought nothing else could stir my heart more. But one day Jenny left a letter in my desk. No stamp, no name on the outside. That afternoon the school was quieter than usual. I walked out of class, my mind still buzzing with the memory of our pretend wedding, the wrinkled tissue veil, the sparkling paper ring, the wildflowers tucked in her hair, and the sound of her laugh under the golden sun. It all felt like it had just happened. Still warm, still real. During class, I could not concentrate. The math problems danced on the page. My pencil stopped halfway through a sentence, and I stared out the window, where maple leaves were just beginning to turn. Mr. Grant was lecturing about the state of Ohio, but to me it sounded like a warm lullaby. My eyes drifted to the last desk where Jenny always left little marks. A heart drawn in pencil, a faint J plus J etched in the corner. During recess, everything looked the same, the kids running wild, the squeaky shoes, the wind shaking the window frames. But something was different at my desk. The drawer was open just a crack. I felt a tug inside urging me to look, not because I wanted to snoop, but because something told me. Whatever was inside, it was meant just for me. Inside was a folded note, quartered neatly, the kind of square paper we used in art class. No postmark, no name. I slowly pulled it out, my chest tightening. The letter was written in red ink, the handwriting round and a little crooked, like only a child could write. The ink had bled slightly like sunset spilled over calm water. I opened it and read, "To my future husband." By the time you read this, maybe I've already grown up. Or maybe I'm still taking a math test. But no matter what, I still remember you. If you grow up and never marry anyone, I'll still be waiting. You do not need to promise anything. Just remember that we once had each other. Jenny. What could I say to that? My heart clenched. The little schoolboy reading those words was not really me anymore. It was me now, stunned by how something so sincere could be written in smudged red ink. I let out a soft laugh. A laugh at how innocent it was. A laugh because I never imagined a child could entrust something so big into such tiny lines of writing. I read it again slowly, word by word. I thought I might cry, but no tears came. Just a stillness, like finding a quiet harbor in the middle of a drifting life. No explanation. I folded the letter again and placed it gently back in the drawer, a silent promise to keep it safe. I had no idea how to answer something like that. No one had ever taught me how to respond to a letter like that. No one else knew. I did not tell a soul. Not my mother, not Billy, not even Thomas. It was a beautiful secret, kept inside the quiet of our classroom. One day while borrowing Jenny's notebook, I noticed a red ink stain pressed faintly into her finger. And as I flipped through the corner of her pages, I saw a small heart drawn there beside the letters J plus J. I do not know why, but I felt a wave of calm wash over me, as if she was sending me a quiet signal. I still remember. That night as I sat by the window, doing homework, I opened the smudged purple card and read it once more, but my heart said the opposite. I never replied, and now I wonder, did that change everything for both of us? What if I'd written back? What if I'd said something? But I never did. Years later, after I'd grown up, I opened my old memory box and found the letter. The paper had turned yellow, the folds were worn soft, the red ink cracked like fireworks, caught through a broken window. A wave of emotion came over me. I rewrote the words in my head, "Jenny, I never married anyone, because I've always kept you in my heart." But then, it was just a faded line on old paper in a box I had not opened since that day. I never replied, and maybe that silence changed us both. Because of one simple truth. Not all feelings need a reply. Just like that little letter no stamp never sent was still the most beautiful thing I had ever been given. And then the school year came to an end. No announcement, no fanfare. Just a quiet summer morning, and Jenny was no longer sitting in her usual seat. And I had no idea who to ask or where to find those familiar eyes again. The end of the school year settled in like a soft autumn breeze, soaking gently into the window frames, into the messy hair of every child. I had grown used to the peaceful rhythm of 5th grade arriving at school, sitting at the last desk, sneaking glances at Jenny, and leaving in the afternoon with the sound of the school bell, comforting my small soul. But that day was not peaceful anymore. That first summer morning, I walked into class, and the first thing I saw was Jenny's empty seat. No veil, no trace of J plus J drawn faintly in pencil. Her seat had become a hollow space that made my chest tighten. I stood frozen by her desk, feeling an emptiness that made it seem like someone had taken a part of me away. Her math notebook was still there, its cover worn and corners curled from use. The smell of paper, of chalk dust, the same scents that once carried her laughter, were now fading like memories left behind under pale morning light. No one said goodbye. No one announced she had transferred schools or explained why she left so suddenly. There was only that absence, the scent of old books, and the summer sun pouring into the classroom, unnoticed, as if her leaving was just a natural thing, as if no one had ever sweetly called me husband out loud. I stood still, trying to hold back a sadness I did not have a name for. The schoolyard was unusually quiet. My classmates lingered nearby, quiet as sighs. Some kids sat by Jenny's desk, flipping through her notebooks. Their faces looked blank, like they wanted to ask but dared not speak. No one turned to look at me, as if afraid they would see the tears forming in my eyes. I sat down at my desk, lowered my face into my notebook, trying not to let the tears fall. The morning light slid gently across the classroom floor. I heard the sound of chalk falling, the rustling of leaves in the hallway. And in that silence, I felt something big had just left my childhood without even saying goodbye. The next afternoon, I sat in my usual seat, hand tucked in my cap so no one saw it tremble. I opened Jenny's math notebook, looking for the J plus J in the corner, but it was gone, just a faint chalk smudge. I leaned in, hoping to hear her steps, her laugh. But the row of desks stayed silent, like a lonely period left on a page. After class, I picked up her chair, thinking I'd place her notebook on it like she used to, but I couldn't. I knew then Jenny wasn't coming back. I placed the notebook in the drawer and let no one else see it. Walking home, my shadow stretched long beneath the summer trees. I couldn't remember the way. My heart quietly asked, was I too afraid to say, "See you soon," to hold on, even for one last smile or her soft voice saying, "This is my husband"? That night under my desk lamp, I opened the old box, the tissue veil, the not yet wedding day card, the folded heart, and the candy wrapper ring. I held the veil, closed my eyes, as if that could bring her back. But no, she was gone, leaving behind a memory like an unfinished poem and a sentence never spoken. No one said goodbye. She left as if she'd never called me husband. I stood in the twilight, somewhere between the fading light of childhood and the things left unsaid, and a piece of my heart quietly broke. But I held on to it, because by holding on, I was keeping something that had once been real, even if it only flickered briefly in a 5th grade classroom. After that year, I never saw Jenny again. But strangely, there have been moments in life, a corner of a street, a burst of laughter, a passing figure that made my heart stop and wonder, was that her? The years rushed by like sudden summer rains. I grew up into an adult, but some part of me never grew out of that heart, the part that still held on to the memory of a girl named Jenny, just as she was in 5th grade. Many times life brought me close to that memory again, only to miss it by a beat, almost touching it, but never quite. I remember the first time I heard her name again, not from my own lips, but from someone else's. It was at an old coffee shop I used to visit on weekends to enjoy a slice of apple pie laced with cinnamon. The shop owner, a woman in her 50s with a gentle smile, furrowed her brow while sweeping up crumbs and said, "Now that I think of it, there was a student named Jenny who transferred suddenly years ago. Pretty girl, like a wildflower." I stood frozen, my heart pounding, like it wanted to race back to age 10, but she just shrugged and went back to wiping tables. The name Jenny was nothing more than a faded image, a memory not quite strong enough to spark a story. Another time at a small art exhibition hosted by our old school, I stood in front of a sunset landscape, the strokes simple but full of feeling. Next to it was a small label, Jenny, grade 5, supervised by homeroom teacher. My heart skipped a beat. Jenny, the name, echoed inside me like a ringing bell. But when I asked the person next to me, they just shrugged. Probably someone else with the same name. Not sure if anyone transferred that year. And I quietly walked away like I just missed a shadow I almost saw. There was even a time while going through old photos, the schoolyard golden maple leaves kids lined up in rows, I spotted a small figure in the back, her hair tied in 2 neat pigtails. My heart leapt. Almost. When I ran closer for a better look, it was just a photo of 2 sisters walking home, not Jenny. But my heart still fluttered every time I thought it might have been her. After many years of teaching, I was invited back to visit the school. The old classrooms had been rebuilt. The hallways were brighter, the background music quietly ticking along. As I passed by a 5th grade classroom, the desks no longer bore carved names, and the chalk dust had long since faded. But I still paused by the last desk, ashamed to admit I looked one more time. I thought I saw a faint Jenny scratched into the wood, but maybe it was just dust and memories colliding in my eyes, making them blur. Then at a reunion, I heard a voice from the back row ask, "Do you still remember Jack?" I turned around, but all I saw were familiar faces. None of them were the girl with black hair from long ago. My heart sank. The name, Jenny, lingered in the air, floating through the murmur of voices like a ghost of something once real, then dissolved like a scent that drifts by without staying. There was one time at a small train station on the edge of town when I heard someone call out Jenny in a woman's voice. I turned around, heart leaping, but it was just a sound carried by the wind. A woman sitting nearby turned with a child in her arms. The girl must have been about 5. It had to be someone beyond my imagination. Only once. Maybe just that one time. I truly saw her again, but my heart was too afraid to call her name. It was a quiet autumn afternoon. I had come back to visit the old city. I wandered into a second-hand bookstall where stacks of worn notebooks and yellowed comics lined the shelves. A young woman had just closed a notebook and turned around, her eyes hard to describe, as if she just stumbled across a memory. A breeze curled inside me, and for one brief moment I thought, "That's her, Jenny." But I turned away. I was afraid to pretend, afraid that saying her name would shatter the delicate memory I had carried all these years, because I knew maybe we no longer had the innocent glances we once shared. The name Jenny, whenever someone says it, my heart still stirs. When I open old notebooks and see those pencil hearts, the feeling still lingers. People grow up, people forget. But there are things that, even when they cannot be held, remain permanent marks in the heart. And then one day, just when I thought I had finally forgotten, the letter appeared, an old envelope, an old, familiar handwriting, a line on the front that made my heart stop. To Jack, the one I once called husband. I am 68 now. I live quietly with my wife and 2 children in a small house in the suburbs. One day I had to return to my mother's old house to help clean it out, a place full of dusty keepsakes and stories long stored away. While sorting through stacks of old books and memory boxes, I came across a wooden box tucked away on the top shelf. It had no lock. On the lid, in shaky handwriting, it said, "Jack, no need to pretend to forget." I opened it. Inside were a bunch of tiny things, a lost button, a heart-shaped card, and at the very bottom an envelope thin as rice paper with no stamp, just a single line to Jack, my little husband. My hand trembled. Youth had long since closed its doors. And yet, this letter from Jenny, the girl who once called me her 5th grade husband, had returned like a breeze from the past. The paper was pale yellow now, corners torn, edges worn. The handwriting was faint, the J tilted, the K rushed, as if written by a child nervous or excited. The first line read, "I know that by the time you read this, I might be somewhere far away." I read slowly. Each word echoed like a heartbeat. It had been so long since I opened it, not since 5th grade. My mother must have kept it, thinking it was a sweet note from childhood. She never spoke about it, but when I squinted at the envelope, I knew she'd felt something too. I gently unfolded the letter. The scent of old paper rose faintly, the scent of summer of 2 children long ago. The message inside was just one long, innocent, but deeply sincere line. To Jack, my little husband, today I'm folding this letter for you so that if one day we are no longer school kids, at least this still remains a message from our earliest days. If you are reading this, I want you to know I still remember your laughter. I still remember the smell of chalk dust. If life later makes you forget our paper wedding, those fragile memories, don't worry, I've kept them for you. To Jack, my little husband, I still hold you in my heart. Jenny. I felt a tightness in my throat. I had thought I had closed off all the corners of my childhood. But this one letter, this one small letter, opened every door I had shut for 50 years. I asked myself, why is it that in the most ordinary moments of life we sometimes find the words that are most true? I sat there surrounded by keepsakes, eyes wide but wet. Decades had passed. I had married, raised children, worked a full career. And yet part of my heart still held a quiet space for Jenny, that boy from 5th grade who once looked up into her eyes. He came back to me now, fireflies of feeling flickering in his chest. The letter was never meant to be answered. It was meant to be sent. I did not call anyone. I did not question why. I quietly reset the old desk and placed the letter back in the box like a shield to protect a memory that could never be allowed to fade. On a calm evening, I sat by the window. A mug of coffee steamed softly beside me. Outside, the wind rustled the leaves. Inside, I felt the quiet thump of my heart, just like the first time I was called husband. In that short moment, youth was bright and vivid again. After 50 years, I finally understood. Sometimes the silliest words are the most honest. And from that day on, I lived more peacefully. Because I had learned that childhood is not just made of small passing days. It is made of skies of leaves of nicknames, never spoken aloud, of a little letter that kept my heart warm for a lifetime. The letter had ended, but something in me had opened. And now all it takes is someone saying, "Hey, Jack," in that sweet, youthful voice, and I am 10 again, standing wide-eyed in that old schoolyard. At our class reunion, the auditorium was lit brightly, with a large banner on stage reading, "Return from Memory," on a faded, cream-colored backdrop. The reunion was intimate but formal enough that everyone felt their hearts quietly stirring. Jack stood among the crowd, silver-haired, my eyes surrounded by gentle wrinkles, still trying to keep my back straight, not hunched. On the table in front of me was a warm cup of tea and a small sweet pastry. The faint scent of vanilla brought back the image of a smile behind the old apple pie booth. The host called out names one by one. Applause echoed warmly like musical notes connecting over half a lifetime. And then just as my name was called, a voice rang out from the back. "Hey, husband, it's been so long." I turned around. It had been decades since anyone called me by that name. But this voice, though older, raspier, struck something deep inside. It was Jenny. She stood in the crowd, her hair touched by the frost of time, but her eyes still bright, her smile just as clear as ever. She waved in a way only she could, the same way she once drew a heart on paper just for me. My heart, even at 68, skipped a beat. My palms trembled, my voice caught. I remembered that small schoolyard, the falling leaves, the fluttering tissue veil. Now everything had returned. And in that crowd, the girl from before still existed like a faint echo that never faded. Jenny stepped forward slowly but surely and gently pressed her hand to my shoulder. The crowd around us clapped loudly, cheering like two kids had just declared their paper wedding all over again. But I heard nothing, just the clapping in the distance and my own heart stirring. She stood before me, her eyes full of memories. "How have you been?" Her voice did not need an answer, because I knew when someone calls your name husband in a way no one else ever has, it tells your heart that it was real once. We sat together at the table under the warm yellow lights. She told me about living far away, raising her children in her later years. I spoke about retirement, how quickly time had passed, teaching school. My daughter had just brought the grandkids over to visit. Their presence made the quiet house feel alive again. Jenny smiled, her eyes shimmering, as if she had always known these details somehow. Her gaze was warm, like golden winter sun. I remembered the paper ring, the tissue veil, the not yet wedding day card, the childhood letter, and now sitting across from the person who once sent them all, I felt like I journeyed a lifetime just to arrive here. I wanted to say, "You are still here," but instead I simply smiled and said, "Thank you for today." I sat beside the one who once called me her husband, but in my heart I knew My real wife, Linda, was the one I had truly lived my life with, and because of that I could smile without regret. After the reunion, as the crowd spilled into the hallway, I saw Jenny standing at the far end. She stood in the soft glow of the overhead lights, smiling playfully. I walked over, reached out to touch her hand, and said only one thing: "It's been so long." "My paper bride." She smiled. And in that moment, childhood burst bright all over again. And I know now it is the simplest things like calling each other husband, drawing hearts, or saving a letter for decades that can hold the heart steady for a lifetime. That night, I sat alone in the living room, the soft yellow light casting gentle shadows across the wrinkles time had carved on my face. Outside, the wind rustled the leaves, and I just sat there holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold, while my heart remained warm, stirred by words I thought had faded into the past long ago. "Hey, husband, it's been so long." That voice echoing through a crowded reunion hall had left me speechless. Not because I was embarrassed, not even surprised, but because even at 68, my heart still missed a beat when I heard it. All the memories came rushing back that summer afternoon when we played pretend wedding, the paper ring. Jenny slipped onto my finger. The old letter with no stamp, her messy handwriting that read, "To Jack, my little husband. Now we both have families, children, grandchildren. Life has taken each of us down different paths. But her eyes, that smile, she is still the Jenny I once knew, the girl who used to draw hearts on the back of her notebooks and giggle as she called me husband. Sure, it was just childhood. But sometimes a 10-year-old calling you husband is something you carry with you for the rest of your life. So if you too once had someone who made you blush, back in elementary school, or a silly, sweet moment that never left your heart, I would love to hear about it. Share your story in the comments below. Maybe, just maybe, someone out there is remembering the same kind of moment just like you are. And if stories like this help soften your heart, even just a little in the middle of this fast-paced world, then do not forget to hit subscribe and follow the channel. Every week I will tell you a small piece of memory, maybe a little old, but never ever forgotten.